Words evolve and change over time. It's always happened, but before the internet, it was a very slow process that would happen over the course of decades. Many words we use every day had different meanings when they were first introduced. For example, the word nice. He's a nice boy. That used to mean foolish or silly or simple. Or this word, silly. Silly used to mean something was worthy or blessed. That's a silly boy, worthy or blessed. Or the word fizzle used to be a word for breaking wind softly. Never knew that before, and that might be ready for a comeback. I don't know, but it's an interesting use of the word. Many of the words we use as positive exclamations over and over again every single day in modern culture were originally negative words. For example, the word incredible. We use that all the time. Literally, incredible meant without credibility. But over time, that meaning began to change, and then a story about gamma ray energy transforming a physicist named Bruce Banner into the Incredible Hulk created a culture shift in how we use the word. Incredible now means astonishing and awe-inspiring. Amazing is another word. It was a word used to describe something so confounding it couldn't possibly be understood using common sense. Amazing grace takes on a much deeper meaning when we consider how the word amazing was originally intended in our language. The way word usage changes over time is called semantic change. Historically, semantic change was the result of clever innovation. A writer might think of using a word in a slightly different way. That's what happened when Stan Lee labeled his Hulk character incredible. Over a period of time, this innovative new way of using a word gets adopted by a small subculture and then garners wider acceptance in popular culture until the new enhanced meaning becomes ubiquitous, or you see it everywhere. Everybody uses incredible now the same way. That's exactly what happened after a journalist named Kelly Williams Brown launched a blog called adultingblog.com in July of 2011. She then went on to write a best-selling book I wish I had been given on my 18th birthday called Adulting: How to Become a Grown-Up in 468 Easy-ish Steps. Adulting is a new word for an old problem. And it's a useful word because when someone says, I'm just not good at adulting, or adulting is hard, or the variation of please don't make me adult today, you don't need a definition of what the word means. You get it. You understand exactly what it means. Young people today are adulting later than previous generations. I read an article recently in the New York Times about millennials. The article said more and more 20 and 30-year-olds were living in delayed adolescence than ever before. Now, hear me, there's no judgment here at all. I get it. Jobs are not plentiful or as profitable as a generation or two ago. Student loan debt makes it almost impossible to go out now and be able to kill it the way maybe you could 2 or 3 generations ago. But the article compared today's 25-year-olds to their parents at the very same age. Today's 25-year-olds are twice as likely to still be students than their parents were at that same age. Today's 25-year-olds are 50% less likely to be married than their parents were at the same age. Today's 25-year-olds are 50% more likely to be on their parents' payroll than their parents were when they were at the very same age. Now, as we began this series trying to think through adulting, I thought it would be interesting to reach out to some of our 20-somethings. Maybe young 30s and 20-somethings, and ask them questions about when they knew they were finally adulting. When did they know that they finally had kind of arrived or were in the adulting phase? And I got some wonderful responses. Brianna said this: things as simple as deciding to go to class in college, deciding to start a project early so I wasn't stressed, and then saving ahead of time so I wasn't broke buying gifts for Christmas. That's a big deal, isn't it? When you finally begin to do that, you think maybe buying gifts ahead of time would be a wise decision. That's adulting. Casey Bice said this: I think one of the first things I remember is when I began to fuel the vehicle I was driving. For me, it was mostly making financial decisions that made me start feeling like an adult. When I was young, it felt like everything just happened magically, by itself. And I think that's hilarious. It's like, wow, I've got to put gas in this thing. I didn't know that. That's amazing. Brittany said this: things that made me feel like an adult: making my own doctor's appointments, paying the rent, getting a bill for the first time, learning how to tip, having to make my son's doctor appointments, going to church by myself. I remember Jimmy and Sharon, y'all were gone. I remember she said, it's the first time in my life I've ever come to church by myself and my parents weren't here. This is amazing. I thought that was great. Derek, I asked Derek. He said, well, I felt like a full-fledged adult the first time I bought my own car. And then he said, I did a terrible job and I paid way too much, but I did feel like an adult. I asked Courtney. He says, these questions really had me thinking. I feel most like an adult when I moved out of my parents' house and was forced to budget every penny that I made. These are all people, by the way, in their 20s, maybe early 30s. Julia Colson, I asked Julia, she says, honestly, the first things that made me feel like an adult was working, cooking, and providing all my wants and a few needs in high school, and then raising kids. I asked Michaela. She said, I started feeling like an adult when I applied to college by myself and had to work it out on my own. Then she said, buying my first car at 22 was my true I'm an adult now moment. And by the way, that is a Patriots jersey Michaela is wearing, and we won't talk about that, but just know that that is a Patriots jersey. Her husband, a Falcons fan, Jacob, I asked him, and Jacob said, responsibilities such as paying my own bills, cooking, buying my own food, and paying for my own car and its repairs. Of course, moving out for the very first time. Deanna, I asked Deanna this. She said, well, when I first realized life was real and I had to be the adult was when my mom died when I was 23 years old. Suddenly, not only did I have my 4 kids, but I also now had my 16 and 19-year-old siblings to raise. And I had to figure out how to feed all of us, how to house all of us, how to buy shoes and clothes for all of us, how to take care of 6 kids. She was 23. They all said they could tell they were adulting when they started having money to go into savings or paying taxes, or they could tell they were adulting when they graduated from only eating ramen noodles. A lot of people said that when their diet got a little expanded, or they could tell they were adulting when they got their call for jury duty. I mentioned to my daughter-in-law, Rachel, adulting, and she said it was when I learned how to change my own oil in my car. And I thought, that's amazing. How did you learn to do that? She said, I was just driving down the road and I saw a sign that said oil change, and I just turned in and it got changed. It was amazing. That's adulting. That's adulting. Kelly Williams Brown, the writer that coined the word adulting, writes this: there's not one adult on this earth who has not felt the deep, unsettling feeling that their life is wobbly and unmanageable, no matter how diligently they sort the recycling and iron their sensible slacks. This is supported by a popular, though incorrect, perception that you're surrounded by people who have it all together, while you flop around like a fish who can't remember to pay her water bill. All through your life, there will be times when you feel you don't have a clue about how to live at the stage of life you are in, and it will seem like you're clueless and maybe even faking it. But that means you having confidence in your adulting for much of your life is a hit or miss proposition. Let me say that again. Confidence in your adulting for most of your life is a hit or miss proposition. In other words, all of us sometimes question whether we know how to adult or not. All of us. Michaela said this to me: I'm 26 and I still don't feel like I'm a full-on adult. Michaela, I'm 55 and I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't feel like I am all the way adult yet either. I struggle with that. Adulting isn't only something young adults struggle with. There are aspects of adulting I'm still working on every single day. There are many things I wish I could have understood as well in my 20s as I understand now, and one of them is this: there are days, weeks, months, and even years when every one of us feels like we're just a little bit of a fraud, that we really don't know as much as people around us think we know. We know deep down we're making up life as we go, and one day something's going to happen and it's going to all come out in the open and everybody's going to learn we don't have our stuff together nearly as much as they may think. When I was a young guy, just left Atlanta and moved to Texas, and I was in college, There was a pastor named John Bassanio at First Baptist Church, Houston, Texas. Now, I'd only been in country churches my whole life, small country churches, and suddenly I'm in college and I'm in this mega church. I didn't even know there was such a thing. It was like 6,000 people on Sunday mornings, and I'm watching this preacher preach, and it was crazy how it worked, but he and I actually became like friends. I became his mentee. He became a mentor to me. I never will forget, I asked him after a service, can you imagine being an 18-year-old kid, and I walked up to him and said, would you come to my house and would you maybe have supper? And he said, yeah, I guess. I mean, it was just crazy that he became a mentor to me. And so I followed him around and we preached places together, and it was a really big influence on me, but he never went to graduate school. It was kind of fluky. He had done college, but he had been this great preacher, and he had pastored in Del City, Oklahoma, and then he took First Baptist Houston from 200 to 6,000, and he was kind of, everybody knew who he was. And I said, do you ever feel inadequate? And he said, all the time. He said, I can't tell you the times that I just think somebody's going to find out that I don't know all that they think I know. And it was like, you, the biggest guy I've ever been around in my whole life, you? That was amazing to me. It's such a common feeling that we have several terms for it. It's most commonly referred to as the impostor syndrome, but it's also called the impostor phenomenon, or the fraud syndrome, or the impostor experience, and the fear of being found out. This was very revealing. You know the great novelist John Steinbeck. Listen to what he wrote. He said, I'm not a writer. I've been fooling myself and I've been fooling other people. Steinbeck wrote this in his diary in 1938, a year after Of Mice and Men was published, and a year before The Grapes of Wrath was published. Can you imagine? He wrote Of Mice and Men, and he wrote Grapes of Wrath, and in the middle he said, I'm a writer. I'm not a writer. I'm fooling people. I'm an imposter. You say, yeah, but I'm sure CEOs and big stars in business, they seem like they've got it together. They must feel different than I feel. I just feel like I'm the only one that doesn't know. Well, in an interview with the New York Times, Howard Schultz, CEO of Starbucks, said this: very few people, whether you've been in that job before or not, get into the seat and believe today that they are now qualified to be the CEO. They're not going to tell you that, but it's true. Jessica Collette is a sociologist who's done extensive research on imposter syndrome, and she finds the only people who don't experience that feeling of inadequacy, that feeling of being a fraud sometimes, are really frauds. They are those people who are objectively not very smart, but they can't seem to ever stop talking about how smart they are. Dr. Collette said those people don't feel at all like frauds. They feel they know exactly what they're doing, and how could other people not know what they're doing? But those of us who feel like adulting is a level of being human well beyond our capacity to master can breathe a sigh of relief, because those feelings are just simply a normal part of being a good human being. And while we might feel terribly inadequate, we have to make the move towards being an adult. We have to step out. We can't let our paralysis keep us sitting on the sofa and say, I don't know how to adult. We've got to make a move. It's important in adulting to realize even when you don't feel up to the task, you have to march forward with your best attempt. Last week, Brandon talked about how sometimes in life we fake it till we make it. And you guys know at the Village, we champion being genuine and authentic. That being said, I really believe faking it until you make it is a far better strategy for taking on life than sitting in the bedroom waiting for some breakthrough to happen that's never going to happen if you keep sitting in the bedroom. Does that make sense? All of us have to step out into a world that we feel terribly inadequate to take on. We don't know how to do it, but we find out as we step out and begin to do it. We have to make a move. We ultimately are responsible. We have to say, I'm here in whatever state I find myself. This is not where I want to be, and I don't have any interest in staying in this place. If this place isn't better today than it is, or tomorrow than it is today, I want to make a move. Moving from here to there happens when we identify an end point, and then we begin to move towards it or pursue it incrementally. Each and every step, we get a little bit closer to the objective of becoming fully who we believe we can be. When we take that focused action, we will eventually either arrive at the place we plan to go, or, as happens so often, we'll arrive at an unexpected place that's far more wonderful than our wildest imaginings. It happens all the time. Steve Jobs figured out the way around being paralyzed by the impostor syndrome when he was a young man, and it's also a good starting strategy for adulting like a boss. All of us need to think about this. This was Steve's observation. When you grow up, you tend to get told the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world. Try not to bash into the walls too much. Try to have a nice family, have fun, save a little money. That's a very limited life, he writes. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again. So adulting is a problem for all ages, and it's something worthy of our time. How can we get a handle on what it means to adult? And some of us are in our 50s and we still struggle on this adulting. Let me say this. To adult, I need to determine the rules that are going to govern my life. To adult, I need to determine the rules that are going to govern my life. Rules are important. They really are. We give children rules to keep them safe and to keep them focused on life progress and also to keep them from driving us insane. There's certain things that we say because we've got to stay sane, so we tell them, you can't do that. Some of the rules our parents set for us as children have applications for us even as adults. I'm glad I learned how to chew with my mouth closed. I probably would have had a difficult time convincing Jane to marry me if I was chewing with my mouth open all the time, but because I chewed with it closed, she said yes. I think it helped at least. Some of the rules our parents set for us no longer fit. Some rules are good for children, but they can be downright bad for us as adults. For example, cleaning our plates. That's a good rule when we're little, I guess. You know, clean your plate. You got to learn how to do that. Clean your plate. I don't want you to eat everything. But some of us can forget that rule now. We don't have to keep cleaning our plate all the time. When you can set yourself free enough to write rules for your own life based on what works for you, rather than maybe old rules written by somebody long ago that no longer fits who you are or what's working for you, then your life will begin to click in and maturity will become a reality. Now, some of you say, but I thought God set the rules for our life. Well, some people understand God that way. They see God as the great rule maker. But can I tell you, I don't see God that way. In fact, I think when they tried to force Jesus into saying God's the great rule maker, Jesus said, hey, you're getting hung up on all kind of stuff you shouldn't be hung up on. God really has two rules he cares about: love him and love people. That's really all that God cares about. So I don't see all of these rules that God is making all these rules for us. I believe that's fairly arbitrary. The different rules that we get to live by, they're rules that we have to figure out in our life. What's going to make life work for us? I get to choose the life I'm going to live based on the rules and priorities I decide I'm going to follow. Rules I set for myself as a grown-up should be about helping me get better, do better, and be a better person. I want to get on track, so I'm moving towards my goals. I want to stay on track, so I don't sabotage my progress, which I have done a few times in my life. I want to protect myself from unhelpful behavior. I want to learn how to not do those things that are going to put me in the ditch. Let me give you an example of a new rule that I've set for myself, and it's to make spending decisions based on my long-term best interest rather than how a purchase or investment or a gift will make me feel temporarily. Now, some of you, this is real important. I'm 55, and I have made a lot of emotional purchases in my life. Most of those emotional purchases I have regretted soon after I made them. I bought 2 Jaguars in my 20s that I regretted minutes after I made the purchases. But it just seemed like the thing to do at the time, and it would fulfill something in me, and I found that it was not so. The single most important lesson I can teach you about financial health is to make financial decisions based on your long-term best interest, not on emotions. For some reason, we can infuse financial decisions with a level of emotional power that never really pans out. But we invest all kinds of magical thinking into why we purchase or why we're making an investment, while that's the single missing link in our life. If we could only get that, then it would make it all perfect. We can do it with almost anything. It can be a pair of shoes. I've done this with a pair of shoes. I'll think, if I buy this pair of shoes, I'll be such a better communicator. This will be it. I'll kill it. I will kill it because these shoes are what'll put me over the top. And it is true that something like shoes or something that you wear can make you feel a little more confident, but it's not going to matter a lot about whether you're a better communicator. You understand? It's not that big a deal, but I'll talk myself into things like that. When your emotional brain takes over and you act out in rage, do you remember what we call that? Amygdala hijack. The same thing can happen in a purchase. Your emotional brain takes over, your logical brain kind of gets trumped for just a moment. You make the decision, you make the purchase, and then your logical brain kicks in and it's like, what did I just do? So that's one of those rules I'm trying to set for myself that I think will make life a lot better. Rational decisions will always serve us better in the long term. Taking time to breathe and think through when and how we spend money will almost always be better than spending based on the emotional feeling we get in the moment. Emotional decision making about money results in strange and financially harmful impulse purchases. And failing to master the lesson that I'm talking about will greatly hinder you in the successful life that you want to have. When I spend money right now because it's going to make me feel good right now, I'm going to lose momentum in the bigger decision of what kind of life do I think Jane and I are supposed to live, the big life that I feel like we're supposed to live. If I'm making small emotional decisions along the way, I'm killing the momentum for the big life I feel like we need to live. Financial guru Dave Ramsey said it like this: if you will live like no one else, later you can live like no one else. That's pretty good wisdom, don't you think? That's an example of saying, as an adult, I've got to set some rules for how to live this life. And that's one of those rules. Sometimes I make rules for myself that turn out to be bad rules, and if a rule is robbing you of the life that you know you're supposed to live, then it's okay to change the rule. Don't get stuck in a rule that doesn't work. I remember in college setting all kind of disciplines I would have. I was going to read 5 chapters in the Old Testament every morning, and I was going to read 3 chapters in the New Testament every morning, and I was going to read a psalm I'd have all of these things, and I'd do it for 3 or 4 days, and then I'd think, I can't keep up with this. It'd make more sense if I would just do something smaller that I could actually do than trying to set these huge things that I couldn't do. Here's the second key to adulting like a boss. It's realizing my progress is really in my hands. Adulting is about taking responsibility and realizing your progress is really in your own hands. Let me say something now that I say a lot here. God's Spirit is for you, not against you. Now, let me tell you why I say that. Because some people think God is somehow chosen them to be, they're out, they're bad. So everything's happening bad. They're going to step in the ditch and it's going to be God punishing them for stuff. And it's just, God's got this black cloud that's going to follow them everywhere they go because that's just the way life is. I want you to know that is not at all the message of Jesus. That is not at all. Jesus, everything we know about Jesus says God is for us. He is not against us. God is for you, He is not against you. And you've got to understand that because some people have this victim kind of a mentality that just says, I don't have to really be responsible because maybe the cards are just not in my favor. There's a fantasy that we find attractive, but it ultimately hurts us when we indulge it. It's a luxury or privilege that isn't borne out by reality. It's one of the reasons adulting has become a word. It's as if becoming an adult and taking on grown-up responsibilities is an option. Here's the fantasy. If I mess up my life or basically don't do responsible things I need to do, someone else will come along and they will rescue me. Someone else will come along and they will rescue me. Sometimes for some people that happens, and it's nice when you see it happen, but it's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee. I think we teach in church a message that is not helpful as it relates to our personal responsibility. We do believe God is our rescuer. And He is our rescuer, but can I tell you what that means most of the time? I believe God comes and rescues us, but I believe that rescue is primarily in helping us break free from bad thinking. That rescue is God letting us see that there's no condemnation, there's no shame, we don't have to walk with shame, that life can be lived to the fullest. He's not against us, He's not mad at us, He's not wanting to punish us, we don't have to be quivering and frightened by Him. Those things are ways that God delivers us. But in most cases, you will make progress as you open your life up to God's flow and you begin to do next right steps. If I'm going to first grab onto hope enough to survive and then eventually work enough to thrive, it's ultimately going to be based on decisions I make and actions that I take. I don't want you to get discouraged or overwhelmed by this, though, because embracing this idea that my survival and my success is primarily my responsibility doesn't mean that you're in it all alone. God is with you. God is with you. That's huge. God is for you. That's huge. And he places you in a church around people who also are with you and for you. The village is a community. You know what the Bible says? The Bible says this group, this church, is much like the human body. We all are connected, and we all are important, and we all benefit each other. Look at what the text says on the screen. The way God designed our bodies is a model for understanding our lives together as a church. Every part depended on every other part. The parts we mention and the parts we don't. The parts we see and the parts we don't. If one part hurts, every other part is involved in the hurt and in the healing. If one part flourishes, every other part enters into the exuberance. You are Christ's body. That's who you are. You must never forget this. Only as you accept your part of that body does your part mean anything. Now, I asked our 20-somethings, I said, what are some adulting questions that you have? What are some things that you've thought about that maybe you haven't come to an answer with yet? And I just wanted to jump down here and just see a couple of them. Where's Brianna? Where's Brianna? There you are. Hey, Brianna. What questions did you ask me?
I asked what tactic is best to determine when you should continue working on something and when you should let it go.
Elaborate just a minute more.
Basically learning when do you know when to stop working on something? For example, if you're applying for a certain area or job, when should you step back and realize maybe it's not for me, or should you keep trying?
That's awesome. I thought that was a great question. Kind of, when do you hold them? When do you fold them? When do you stay on the path to try to get to the resolution, or when do you say, this is not the path and I need to find another path? I thought about that. I thought that would be a wonderful thing for us to spend some time on. Great question. Brittany, you asked a great question. What was your question? Do you remember?
How do you grocery shop for an entire week?
Isn't that a great question? How do you grocery shop for an entire week? You do it cooking. What do you say? What do you say something like that?
I think the key is planning, making menus, and then checking the pantry and the refrigerator before you go to the grocery store.
That's a good answer. That's a great answer. I don't know. It just always is there. It's there. It's just I open the cabinet. It's like it's all there. Derek? What's that question you asked? You had a bunch of questions. What was one of them you asked?
My question was if 401ks and Roth IRAs and such are really important to us as individuals and as a society, why aren't they more publicly advertised, like Coca-Cola or Pepsi or things like that?
I thought that was a great question. And I didn't know the answer to that, but I saw Ray McCune come in today. Ray taught economics for 50 years or something in the public school. What is a 401k? Just put this up there.
A 401k is a savings plan whereby the employer can take money out of your check, and it can be tax deferred. And there's many ways you can do this. You can have it all. You can have it all put like in a money market, or you can put some of it in stocks and bonds and things like that. But over years, this money rolls over and rolls over and rolls over, and it can really, really, really help boost your life. And the beautiful thing about something like that is the money is taken out of your check before you get it, and you don't see it.
That is good. And you're not paying taxes on it. As it's growing and growing and growing, there's no tax hit on it. So that's great, but I was thinking about the fact that in a church, the body of Christ, we have some answers that are just here, and we can help each other. And just like for us older people, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we don't know anything about that we need you guys for. Like our iPhones. We don't know what we're doing with our iPhones. It's like, can you please help me explain what this is doing? I don't know what this is doing. So, and there's so many other things that we can help each other with in life, and I think that is a beautiful thing. I was shocked at just the different things people wrote. How do I keep or make friends as I get older? What a great adulting question. What is the best way to handle rejection when interviewing for a job? What a great question. Is it ever okay to spank a child? What a great, great question. When hosting a dinner party for people who may have dietary needs, is it rude to ask them to bring food that you can prepare for them, like vegan or vegetarian or gluten-free? Amazing things. One of our young moms said this, am I raising my children right? Am I teaching them right? Am I showing them right? Deandra said this, I have so many questions. I've been going through this life just living day by day with no plan, just surviving, just getting by. You see, that's all my mom really taught me was how to survive. But I want to know, how can I be successful? I'm 31 years old and I have 4 kids, and sometimes it feels like life is going nowhere. I wish I had more family to lean on when tough times come and we can't even make a next move because we don't know which way to go. Out of all the questions I have, that's the biggest because of my success would help my kids live better and have better opportunities. Those are the things I'm wanting to know. Let me say this to our 20 and 30-year-olds. You're all amazing. You are amazing, and we stand in awe of you. You maybe have not figured it all out, but neither have we, and we are excited to be in this together with you. You will never be looked down on here, ever. One of my favorite verses, and it's been a verse since I was a young pastor, is found in 1 Timothy chapter 4. The Apostle Paul is writing to this young pastor who was about 25 years old. His name was Timothy. And Timothy had just become the pastor of the largest church in the world, the church at Ephesus. And Paul said these words to him, don't let anybody put you down because you're young. You teach believers with your life, by word, by demeanor, by love, by faith, by integrity. But you don't let anybody put you down because you're young. A third key to adulting like a boss is developing what I call an awareness advantage. That means you need to observe around you things that are working in other people's lives. And when you find something that really resonates with you, adopt it and let it become a part of your life. I've got some really good news for you. You don't have to be the genius who comes up with your uniquely better way to do everything. You just have to be able to find it in someone else. And when you see it and it resonates, you say, I want to be like that. All that's required for you is to be awake, to pay attention a little bit. I want to continually learn and grow every day. And I do it by listening and looking. And when I hear something that kind of resonates, if it's something that I feel like I can adapt into my life, I try to do it. Where you are right now is a direct result of all the information and experiences you've taken in and how you've processed that information and those experiences. I like to say it like this. I'm currently programmed to achieve the current level of success in life. This is kind of where I am. This is everything in my life has led to this. But if I want to move to another level, I've got to be exposed to people who are doing it a little bit differently, a little bit better. In order to develop an awareness advantage, here's some things I find helpful. Maybe this would be something you would choose to do, maybe 1 or 2 of these things. Find some people you admire and model what they are doing. Unless you're 100% satisfied with who you are and where you are in your life right now, you probably know some people who are doing things with their lives that you'd like to be doing. You want to write a book? Find somebody who's written one. You want to invent something? Find somebody who's invented something. Kind of see what they've done. When you know someone has done what you want to do, begin to study everything about them. Pay attention. If you see a family that just seems to have a better relationship with their kids than you do, study them. Find out what it is. If you find somebody who handles money well, Ray McCune would be an example of this. He handles money really, really well. Find out what he does, what he reads, what he's thinking. How does he make the decisions that he's making? It's a big, big deal. You want to learn how to cook healthy? We have some fabulous people in our church that are fabulous cooks. Find out what they do. Talk to them. Figure it out. Pay attention to the people around you. I remember Jane and I went last year to the Safe House, actually it was 2 years ago, Safe House end of the year big banquet. And at the Safe House end of the year banquet, they honored 2 families who had been providing meals once a month at Safe House for like 7 years. So these two families owned one night a month, and they would get their whole families together, and that would be the way they would serve the poor. Jane and I went home, and we said, wouldn't that be an amazing thing if people that were the closest to us, if we took a night and we fed the poor? And so we asked, got on the list, got a day, began to do it with some of the people in our small group, began to share it with Ethan and Rachel, Jen and Brandon ready to go to do it. Suddenly, now we have something that's kind of started that's a part of our life. We, as a family, we're a part of monthly feeding the poor. But that didn't drop out of heaven. That was us paying attention and saying, that would be a beautiful thing for us to get to do. That would be a beautiful thing for us to get to be a part of. Second thing is this: stretch beyond your level of comfort. Don't just think that life has to be just what it's always been. Stretch it out a little bit. Begin seeing life as an adventure. Strive to do more. Don't settle for the path of least resistance. Try different foods. Do it differently. I've got a friend, she only eats chicken tenders. Chicken, I mean, it's like we go to some gourmet restaurant, she has to take a bag with Chick-fil-A chicken nuggets. It's like, are you kidding me? She just can't do it. She just can't do it. Life is an adventure. Get out of the box. Remember, God is on your side. And you can adult, but it means you got to just step out. You just got to step out. One final scripture, 1 Chronicles 4:10. Jabez, an obscure character in the Old Testament, but he prays this prayer: oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory. Let your hand be with me and keep me from harm so that I'll be free from pain. And God granted his request. I love that. Jabez, we don't know if he's young or old, but he was saying, God, I want a bigger life. I want a bigger life. I want to adult at a larger level. I want to be more. I want to do more. Enlarge my territory. And God did. And it can happen for you. Don't give up. All of us struggle sometimes with the idea of adulting. And we're going to talk about it more next week. Would you bow your heads? God, thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing us to spend this time thinking about this new idea of adulting. We've all said it. I don't feel like adulting today. Teach us what are most important truths for us to get as we walk this path that you've called us to walk, this big life, this big adventure that you want us all to experience. We love you and we thank you for this time together. In Christ's name, amen.